All right, let's go ahead and get started. Try to make this microphone not sound so booming. I lost my voice after Sunday's pre-conference. I think I talked too much that day, so I opted for the microphone here a little closer to the mouth, but it's going to still sound like I'm going through puberty at times, so just bear with me. How you guys doing? Good show so far? Good information? Brain's not too full yet, is it? This is going to be a fun talk. There's going to be some takeaways from this talk, but there's also going to be some hard revelations that maybe you're part of a dysfunctional team. Maybe you are the dysfunction. So it's kind of a fun talk. It's my first time doing this talk, although I have worked with plenty of dysfunctional teams over the last few years. Just want to share some ideas with you, level set on some ideas and the roles and responsibilities of a team and the individuals on the team, and we'll just go through it and have a conversation. I'd ask if you want to ask any questions. I'm a cut me off and ask me questions kind of guy. Jump to the microphones if you would. Normally when I'm in a good mood and have a good voice, I will repeat the question the best I can. Not today. So grab a microphone, jump in with the question so it gets recorded, so people listening later can hear it and understand the context of why I'm answering the way I'm answering. So my name's Rich Hundhausen. I'm from Boise, Idaho, and pretty much all I do is run a company that does this kind of work. We create dysfunctional teams. No, that's a joke. We help companies adopt, install, and configure Team Foundation Server. And in doing so, we understand that there's a lot of process improvement opportunities as well as team improvement opportunities. So as you're going to see in this talk, that there's 3 areas which can be improved or can be the areas of dysfunction. And I got to tell you, when we're on site putting TFS in place, nothing has the patient's, chest opened as putting a new ALM system in. You take the opportunity to look at everything in there. Hey, while we're here, can we also recommend ideas for practice improvement? Hey, can we also recommend ideas for new processes, right? New frameworks, new methodologies. How about putting that person over by that person? Things like that. So we do get to see a lot of dysfunction, and we get to recommend a lot of mitigations to those dysfunctions. If you need to reach me, email or Twitter. And I might tell you too, I'll talk about it at the end of the talk. I put together a course with Ken Schwaber and Microsoft, the Professional Scrum Developer course. And it fits into their program of self-assessment and certification. It actually does spend 5 days working in an environment where you're, as a team, solving problems together using Scrum, using the Visual Studio ALM tools, and using the agile software engineering practices such as refactoring, CI, TDD, database development, using the database tools. So it's really kind of nice to see the dysfunctions appearing early in the week and then disappearing as you go through the sprints throughout that course. So it's something I'll have more information about that towards the end, but it has given me more opportunity than just consulting to see how teams work or could work better together. Anybody know who this guy is? It's not me in a couple of years, but it might be close. I love this quote: all happy families resemble one another. In other words, if everything's going great, you don't hear anything about it. But it's the unhappy families that are unhappy in their own specific way. And that's Leo Tolstoy said that. And it does fit so well with software development teams. Teams that are cranking out their software, they're making their deadlines, they're meeting the requirements, fairly defect-free. You don't hear anything about them. That's just to be expected. I gotta tell you though, that's not very often that happens. And when it does happen, it's not the same reason. Over here it's people, over here it's tools, over here it's requirements, over here it's deadlines, over here it's dollars. There's always different reasons behind these dysfunctions. So I thought that this great quote from Tolstoy really told the story. So as I mentioned, there's 3 rings to this circus: people, process, tools. And of course, people is the one that's hardest to find and actually fix. There's a great book out there, I recommend you getting a hold of it. It's called Crucial Conversations and Crucial Confrontations. And if you're a husband, it wouldn't hurt to get this book. It's a way of having the hard conversations, honest, appropriate, respectful, but direct, to get your point across to saying, hey, we really need to do something different, or I'm at fault, and I will do something different. But it's also good for the confrontations. So if there's 2 developers that are alphas on the team, and they're just disagreeing on something, and the disagreement is causing dysfunction, there needs to be a mediator or someone else that can come in and say, look, we need to have a crucial confrontation here and get this settled. So I always start with the people first because it's the hardest one to solve. Oftentimes, feelings will get hurt. People will shuffle around, go to other teams, go to other companies, whatever. So let's start with this. And I like to start with the review. What is the role of the team? Anybody? Just throw out a guess. Say what? Customer service. That sounds like a great answer. What's the role of a software development team? To develop software. To write code, right? What do you do for a living? I write code. Well, it's not actually untrue, but let's roll that up into a bigger meaning. It's to deliver business value in the form of working software. This is important because just coding and delivering software is only part of it. There has to be business value in it. And my emergent architecture talk, which was supposed to be yesterday, we were going to talk about how you deliver business value every sprint or every iteration. That talk's been moved to Thursday afternoon. I don't know if anyone you were going to go to that one, but I've moved that talk to Thursday afternoon, and we're going to talk about how to deliver business value every sprint. Yes, even in sprint 1, things like that. So if that's the role of the team, and it's collectively understood that's the role of the team, then that means the developers, the testers, the architects, database person, the builders, they all have to be part of that same role. So we're going to talk about that collective thinking. First, though, we got to remember people are made up from different cultures. You're not going to have everybody born in the same town, same age group, listen to the same music, Queensryche or whatever, working on the same team at the same time. Different age groups come from different areas of the state, the country, the world. Okay, you're going to have some people that, hey, 8 to 5, I'm done. I got the work-life balance thing nailed. 5 o'clock, I'm gone. Oh, there's production support issues? Not my fault. It was in my contract. I'm 8 to 5er. Then you're going to have the other people, I won't mention their age group, that don't mind sleeping under their desk, right? A couple midnight, late nights, no problem. I understand that's part of the responsibility. But you're going to get people that just agree on different cultures. Hey, my culture is to not work that hard, but it is to work. Different personalities. I hate to break this to you, but not all software programmers can communicate. If they did, it'd be a scary thing. Who knows what would come out? It'd be like stream of consciousness, and you need some kind of a filter to catch it. So yeah, some personalities are very alpha. They take over the meetings. They insist that their estimates are correct, whereas the quiet person in the back who never says anything is maybe more accurate. I was sitting through Stephen Forte's Agile estimation talk before lunch, and he was talking about planning poker. And one of the great things about planning poker is everybody's voice is the same size. It's like a 3x5 card. So loud person that would normally take over the meetings, holding up number 1, same size voice as the smart person that never says anything, holding up a 13. And you go, wait a second, smart guy's holding a 13, loud guy's holding a 1. We ought to think about hearing both sides of the story, rather than just the alpha who normally just, insists that he's always right. People work at different speeds. You've seen people type. How many of you type with 2 fingers? How many type with all fingers? Okay, and there's a bunch of people in between, so I don't know what those fingers are. One of the best productivity things I ever learned was to use the clipboard from the keyboard. The whole Shift-N, Control-C, Control-V, Alt-Tab, Shift-Insert, that whole thing. As soon as you have to pick up the mouse and touch it, slide it over, right-click, copy, Alt-Tab, edit, paste, man, you're lost. But some people just don't get that. They work at a different speed than others. And you know what? All it usually takes is, why are you so fast when you type? Hey, Scott Hanselman, come here, sit down for a second. I'm going to sit down next to you. I'm the mouse guy with the copy-paste. Let me look at your shortcuts. Or let me go watch some of Scott Cate's material on some of the Visual Studio tips and tricks. And let's install ReSharper. How can I get to be as fast as you? Well, it's just usually pairing people up and cross-training that way. What else? People are not machines. People have emotions and bad days. People lose their voices. These facts are immutable and by themselves are not considered dysfunctions. I would hope your team would not have people from different cultures in every seat that work at different speeds, that have different personalities. Some of that's okay. There's some cross-learning that can happen there. You're very cross-functional at that point, but hopefully you try to come to some consensus on some of these things. But that by themselves are not dysfunctions. That's just life. So what are the true dysfunctions? Well, I go back to a book that actually nails most of them. The 5 dysfunctions of a team. Doesn't matter if your team's software development or it's the guys that change your tires at the gas station, if they still do that. Trust is a big one. You can't mandate trust. I can't come in and say, okay, everybody on this team, we're doing Scrum, just instantly trust me, trust them, trust that the code that I've unit tested will work and won't break your tests, trust that the tests you wrote will thoroughly test the code I've written. Trust has to be earned, even with geeks. Conflict. Nobody likes conflict. Well, some people like conflict. The alphas like conflict because it lets them be more alpha about their decisions. But oftentimes conflict comes up, especially when it's something outside of your team. Remember, I worked in Germany for a couple of years writing software for our military, and we built the best application that the J6 would not install. And it was because, their boss didn't work for our boss, or you've heard this before, right? The software developers build this awesome thing, and then they go to hand it off to the ops people, and they say, we weren't included early enough to know if this is something we want to install and support or not. Well, the good news was, after lots of back and forth and conflict at the lower levels, it went up to their flag officer and up to our flag officer. Ours was a 2-star general. There was only a 1-star general. So, always have a 2-star general as a backup plan for that conflict business, but that's not always something you can plan on. So if you think there's going to be conflict or risk, get into it early. What we should have done is invited those guys to our meetings early on and said, here's what we're planning, here's this technology stack we're using, and just giving them a heads up. Oftentimes it becomes a turf war, and if you can just say, hey, we're coming onto your turf, but here's what we're going to bring, and here's a peace offering, you're not going to have that conflict like you could. Lack of commitment's a big one. You hear about the software craftsmanship movement. You hear about agile software development and its ability to make visible the problems on the team. Well, I tell you what, if you have to stand up every day and say what you did yesterday, what you're doing today, and you're either A, saying the same thing every day, or B, you're saying I'm not doing anything, after a while that whole accountability thing catches up with you. That's one of the things I like about Scrum and agile development is you do the daily Scrums, the daily stand-ups, and every day you got to stand there and just tell your brothers and sisters, are you screwing off or are you getting things done? And you kind of let the team manage that themselves. So if you're not committing to doing the work that you've signed up for, that's going to become really obvious. And the team can maybe decide what to do at that point. Avoid accountability, same thing. Accountability, as horrible as it is sometimes when you really have been screwing off, is a good thing. Same thing, I just referenced that. And team results rather than individual results. So you may be the awesome, C# developer, but if the thing gets out the door and the increment you built with the rest of the people isn't working, you're just as much at fault as the rest of them. Who cares that their test didn't catch all of the acceptance criteria, or it was the database stored procedure or whatever that failed? Your C# code ran perfect. That's the attitude you got to get rid of. That's a dysfunctional attitude. So these things here really do apply. And there's a URL there for the book. If we drill into some of the dysfunctions of a software development team, I've been alluding to a few of these, but I like don't care or don't know. Have you heard this one before? Pretty much when somebody's not doing something, it falls into they don't know or they don't care. And you can fix don't know, but you can't really fix don't care. So if somebody, for example, is not commenting their code correctly or using really horrible variable names or not creating their interface according to the specifications, is it because they don't know, or is it because they do know and they're just lazy or they don't care? So oftentimes getting to the root of that problem is important. And if they don't care or they're rude, that's a dysfunction. If they don't know, it's a temporary dysfunction you can fix by pairing people up. Or if you're doing Scrum and you end up with a few extra days at the end of the sprint, too little to take on new work, but too much to just, call it a good day to have a golfing outing. Learn, cross-train each other. Alphas are cowboys. There was a great blog post a couple years ago that said, fire the heroes. Makes no sense when you think about it. Wait a second, I've got this team of 8 developers, and this number 3 person here is an MVP. He speaks at Tech Ed. He speaks MVC and MVVMs in his sleep. We got to keep this guy. No, actually you don't, because the other team members are always looking to this person as the architect. Tell us what to do. How's this code look? And maybe that's right. But this blog post, and I tend to agree with it, take that person and put them on another team and let these people self-organize to fill in the gaps, and overall they will become a better team. You know, you'll have that void for a while and people will be like, what are we supposed to do? Well, what was he doing? Oh, well, we were doing the MVC pattern. Well, we can keep doing that. We don't need him here to tell us. Well, yeah, but I've got this question. Well, use Bing. So getting rid of the heroes or the alphas, certainly the cowboys, you know, might be a way to go. Won't listen, won't learn, won't teach. These are dysfunctions. I've got a slide coming up in a bit called active listening. And active listening is something that I certainly am guilty of a lot. I bet once you see it, I give you a few examples, you'll be guilty of it too. But to take a little steam away from that slide coming up, how many of you have been in a meeting before and you're all given equal time to talk? It's a 20-minute meeting. I talk for 2 minutes, okay? And then this person here, it's their turn to talk. And the very first sentence he says is something to do with the Spring framework. And I'm thinking to myself, the Spring framework, that's something to do with Java. And I tune out the rest of his minute 50 seconds that he's talking. I'm just focused on Spring. Spring, Spring, Spring. As soon as you're done, I jump on you. Spring, what do you mean Spring? I didn't hear anything else you said. So a tip you can use is just have little sticky notes with you. So as you're talking, Spring, question mark, take it off, stick it in front of you, get back to listening. A couple minutes later, you mention something else. I write it down, stick it in front of me. Then when you're done talking, do you guys understand that? Any questions? I had a quick question. You go back through your sticky notes. It's an easy technique to use, and it will keep you focused on what the message is, not the individual syntax that you get hung up on. Specialists. Okay, you think, wow, you know, we need to be a cross-functional team. I need to have a SQL Server expert, a Silverlight expert. I need to have a framework expert. I need to have a testing expert. Well, what you've done there is you set yourself up for failure. Because if any one of those people, call in rich. You know, it used to be get hit by a bus, but now it's call in rich. You know, hit the lottery, something like that. I won't be in, ever. Bye. You're not going to get anything done. So how do you handle specialists? What if you have a team of specialists like that? Yeah. Get them working on things outside their specialty. Pair them up with other people and start to kind of drain off that specialty information, the knowledge, so other people can do those testing tasks or database tasks for light tasks. You know, cross-functional team means, yes, you have the capability to do everything required to deliver that increment, but it also means that no one person is a single point of failure. So not everybody on the team has to know everything, but enough to cover the called-in rich syndrome. And meetings. I don't know where you guys are at with meetings, but meetings tend to become the demise of productivity on a team. So keep the meetings brief. Keep, you know, brief equals 0, asterisk, you know, if you can get away with having 0-minute meetings. And go with something like Link or Messenger, where you can always be meeting with people. Hey, quick question. Anybody, you know how to do this little insurance tax estimate thing? Yeah, it's times 0.73. All right, thanks. So you're almost like you've got a meeting going on all the time for quick little questions and answers. This also leads to my discussion of permission versus forgiveness, which I'll get into in a minute here. But how about these weasel words? Do any of these sound familiar? I'm 80% done. I just started, but I'm 80% done. Nothing's blocking me. Okay, that's your classic developer right there. You're doing your daily scrum. What I do yesterday, what am I doing today, and what's blocking me? And they'll almost never be honest about what's blocking me because they've always got something to do. So because the password's expired to the server, they may not mention that like they should, so they're going to say, well, I got other things to do that don't require that server. You know, for a good, functional, mature team, every little impediment should be listed. That's why you got a scrum master or somebody on the team doing the scrum master's duties, so they can capture these impediments, make a note of it, and then maybe after the meeting say, how important is this? Who do I talk to? Okay, you go back to doing your work. I'm going to go become your, concierge here, your servant leader, and get this impediment removed for you. So if you start to hear these weasel words, you can start to think there might be some dysfunctions that exist. So here's a pop quiz. Some of you who came to my pre-conference on Sunday have seen this already, but you've got a person named Simon on your team. And Simon is the application architect, also the only one with the vision of what the software should do. Something's happened in Simon's personal life. He's left for Australia and gone walkabout. Nobody knows how to reach him or if and when he'll return. I actually had some Australians correct me. I said, gone on a walkabout. He said, no, it's gone walkabout. So that's actually classic Aussie here. Any dysfunctions here? Raise your hand if you think there's a dysfunction or two on this team. Yep. What's one of the dysfunctions you think? What? You've got a hero. So let me ask you the question this way. How many of you think Simon is the product owner? He says he's the only one with the vision of the software. Isn't that the product owner's job or the customer's job? Gosh, so either we have a dysfunction of, why is the product owner also the application architect? That's not good. Or why does a non-product owner is the only one with the vision of the product? So there's some dysfunction there. Oftentimes the architect is the person with the vision, and they're also the person with the architecture development responsibilities. That's a dysfunction. You should make sure that A, everyone on the team has the vision, has access to the vision, shares in the vision, and B, if that person really is the product owner, get them the heck off the team. They shouldn't be doing prioritization of work as well as how should it be built. When persons that decide the what and persons that decide the how are the same person, that's often a recipe for disaster. So that's a dysfunction as well. Now, the fact that a team member had a bad time in his or her life and left, yeah, that's not good, but I wouldn't say that's a dysfunction. Again, that's back to life. So you want to make sure you mitigate this as best you could. So having the vision shared, having someone else be product owner besides one of the team members, having a central product backlog so we all know, we know what we have left to build, and we've got these stakeholders out here that can be looking at it as increments are delivered. That'll let us get to some kind of a vision. One more time. Won't teach, won't learn. Yeah, there could be other dysfunctions here. Maybe the other people didn't know the vision because they wouldn't learn it. So we might need to bring on some more developers that will learn it. So what about Laura? By the way, if you go to Flickr and search on the, I forget what it is, there's a licensing there you can look at, the Creative Commons license. You can find some great photos for your presentations. So Laura is an excellent C# developer. But you know what? She says it's the job of QA to test, so she's not going to write unit tests. What do you think? Is there a dysfunction here? I mean, she basically just said some weasel words. That's not my job. I do this, you do that. There's no collective we. There's no team here. So what could you do with Laura? Could you let her be and have someone else sort of outsource the writing of unit tests to another team member? Maybe. When you have the person writing the unit test that didn't write the code that it's testing, be somebody else, that's not good. How many of you would say, Laura, education? Unit testing is not about testing, it's about design. How many of you would have that conversation with her? Okay, some TDD people in the house. Say, you know what? We know that you know C# like nobody else. Anders calls you with questions. We get that. Okay? But it's about the design and the understanding of the requirements of our software we're building. And by writing these tests, maybe first, or maybe, driven by the tests, you're able to do a better design. Really? Wow, I could be better? Maybe it's just a don't know. If it really is a don't care, if she says anything with T in the word test, unit, integration, UE, I'm not doing it because I don't test, I'm a developer. Then that's a dysfunction, you got to work on that. And my friend Dieter the DBA. When I teach the lifecycle classes, I usually have like Bob the Builder and, Dieter the DBA and things like that. So I'm sure everybody in here has a Dieter in their life, or maybe you are Dieter, because this is a joint dev and IT pro show. But Dieter is the person who owns all the SQL servers. Every SQL server in the company is Dieter's control. And Dieter says no for a living. Hey, we built this great database, can we? No. Why? Because, your goals and Dieter's goals at the end of the year are different. Dieter's an IT admin type. So for Dieter to have a perfect year, nothing catches fire, nothing goes down, everything runs. Developers, completely different. To deploy new things, to deploy new things, to deploy new things. And the two results are counter to each other. So I've been in lots of organizations where the default answer is no until you convince me yes. And you'll hear lots of things like, I don't work for your boss. We don't work for the same, organizational unit. Well, Dieter's obviously an impediment, okay? Now the database, the people on the team know how to create table statements and create triggers and store procedures if you're using them and all that. But at the end of the day, you've got to get that deployed to some kind of an environment for testing and ultimately for deployment. So, dysfunction here, yes or no? Anybody know this environment? Anybody work here? What's Dieter's name in your environment? You don't have to say. Okay. Database administrator, there we go. So yeah, he's very important, he's very busy, he doesn't work for you. Well, the only way you're going to fix this long term is to bring Dieter into the fold, to make Dieter part of the team, to get Dieter to commit to work. But that is not going to be easy and it may never happen. You may have the Dieter skills on your team, but you don't have Dieter's password at the end of the day. So some people would say, and it's kind of my position, that's, well, as a development team, do we care? We were able to sneak a SQL Express edition into our environment. Shh, don't tell Dieter. We were able to do our local testing, do our data loads, run all of our performance tests, and we end up giving this great MSI with all the SQL scripts to our boss and say, great, now Dieter's your problem. So how many of you think the development team, this is out of scope for the development team because it's potentially shippable and it's ops problem to deal with Dieter? It's a little bit of the naive way to think about it. That's how I like to think about it. But what you really need to do is say, well, go back to our role of a team, and it's to deliver business value in the form of working software. And there's no business value without it running in production. So it's kind of the job of the team to figure out how to handle Dieter. Other Scrum developer trainers that I work with, some of these guys will say, we just go to HR and we get rid of Dieter. And some other Scrum developer trainers, the ones that are a little more classically trained, white robe, Jedi Knight Scrum people, they'll say, no. What this is a learning opportunity. Dieter obviously has his inputs. Dieter has his feelings. Dieter has his passions. You should start working with Dieter maybe 6 months prior, just having coffee once a week. Dieter will start to learn developers aren't evil, maybe like you and bond with you. And eventually you can maybe get Dieter to a daily stand-up meeting. And Dieter will get to know the team and get to know the product, get to know Visual Studio, get to see the tools, actually do tests, get to see green balls and feel better about himself. And eventually you'll get Dieter into one of the sprint planning meetings. And Dieter might actually raise his hand and say, I'll help with that. Then you've won. If you can get Dieter into the team, even part-time capacity, now Dieter's on board with the vision. Dieter's on board with the commitments. And that's when you get there. Not easy, personalities, different languages. This is a hard one. So how do you work effectively as a team? Well, you can't just say dysfunctions be gone, we're effective. That would be nice. You just have to keep some of these core ideas in check at all times. Communicate and listen. Your way is not the only way. Other people have good ideas too. Be transparent. If you thought it was 2 hours to build this little class library that did something very simple in your mind, and it's now been 3 days, talk about it. Tell your team, I really underestimated and I'm stuck. I need help. That's why I've been telling you every day at the stand-up that I'm doing something else. Strive to be cross-functional. I hate to say this to you, but in our industry we picked, you're never going to stop learning. Of course, I'm preaching to the choir here because you're at Tech Ed, by definition, a technical education conference. But I feel sorry for the programmers out there that just think their COBOL training from the 60s is going to keep getting them by. Y2K's over, man. Got to keep learning. So strive to be cross-functional. Don't just assume that the next version of C# will be all you'll ever need to know. There are testing approaches you should learn. There are design approaches you should learn. Heck, why not go down and see what the documentation people do? That'll help you build a better product as well. I've already mentioned sharing the goals, the vision, the objectives. Share the commitments. One thing we talk about in Scrum is you commit to delivering a certain piece of functionality in that sprint, and then the team brainstorms to break it down into tasks. So if we're going to take a user story, which is We would like a Twitter feed to sit on our homepage so that people that visit our homepage can see recent tweets about our product or our company. Well, then the team would brainstorm what tasks we have to do to get that done. Someone's got to sign up for a Twitter account. Someone needs to build that control. Someone needs to, research the SDK and learn how to do API calls. Someone needs to build a filter because the boss doesn't want profanity on that homepage. There's a whole bunch of tasks in there. Well, one thing I preach is not everybody needs to own all of those tasks up front. At the end of the sprint planning meeting, you've got 20 tasks, maybe 4 of them are owned. And then every day, every time you finish a task, you go back to the queue and say, well, I'm done. I'm committing to doing work. I'm a good team member. I'm going to tackle this style sheet thing. I'm not really a designer, but I'm going to take this task, grab somebody that does know CSS, and we're going to sit down and make it look nice. Because you're working on this as a team together. That's hard to do too, to force yourself to be cross-functional to get the commitments done. And I'd say passion, compassion and passion, because you want to be able to, I love passionate people, but there's also days where I hate passionate people. And you should also respect that, not everyone has great days like that person's having. So look, guy, I know that you think this is going to be the next awesome product ever built, but I'd like to just get home tonight because, I got a birthday party or whatever. So you need to have compassion kind of both ways, people having good days and people having bad days. And finally, earn each other's trust and be ethical, like I mentioned. So let's talk about forming these teams. Bruce Tuckman did some research back in the 60s, and he came up with these 4 stages for developing teams. So initially, you throw a bunch of people together, you're forming the team. You can almost think of this as like, I don't know, anybody ever seen any of the Saw movies? This is my reference. So, who are you? Why are you here? I don't know, I got abducted and I got thrown into a trunk of a car and here I am. So, the first part of the Saw movies are always, who are you and what are you? Oh, you were a dentist. Oh, okay, and you did lumber and I'm a computer guy, and you're kind of forming together who's the team here. And of course that means some storming after that. Okay, well, wait a second. I thought you were a computer guy. We assumed you could do this. No. No, I just, Atari, video games, Xbox, that's what I meant. Oh, so you don't know how to do software? No, not software, just computers. Okay, well, then we'll have to, figure out plan B. After a while, time going, forward there, you start to norm a bit. Okay, who's good at what? Who can help who? Who can take these kinds of tasks? Are we really cross-functional now? Of course, the end goal to this is you're performing. So productivity is high as time goes on. And then I actually made a 5th one. I blogged about it a while back. It was kind of silly, called swarming. Because in Scrum, you might, as a team, take on several commitments for a sprint. We're going to do the Twitter thing. We're also going to, fix this bug, and we're also going to give you this management report. And then what you want to do is you want to get that high priority one done first before you go to the next one. So a performing team will actually swarm on the problem that's high priority 1 before they go on to high priority 2. But at performing, that's fine too. If we stop at performing, I'm happy with that. Here's the problem people don't realize. Hi, new guy. Glad we got some Silverlight talent on the team. Finally, we've been asking for this position for years. You're back to forming. Add someone new, take away someone, replace someone. I guess that's taking away and adding. You're back to forming. So I feel sorry for companies that have a central development team. Well, we're going to start this new project in fiscal quarter number 2. We're going to need 2 testers, 3 developers, and a database person. So you, and you're on the team. And, boom, they're on the team for a couple months. They get a few sprints. Maybe their velocity starts to norm a bit after some of this norming and performing. And they say, well, you, and your business units need you again, but that's okay. We'll just roll in these other developers and their resume is way the same as yours. Boom, we're back to performing, right? No. So ideally you want teams that are, co-located. I'll go through that whole story. That stay together. I don't want to say forever because that's unrealistic. But we'll stay together, through a release at least. That's why you see this at Microsoft sometimes. After they ship a big product, like I know after SQL Server 2005 shipped, a lot of the SQL Server guys were like, man, that was 5 years of SQL Server. We need a break. We need something different. So you'll see after a big ship at Microsoft, people will change teams. Especially at TechEd, you'll be like, hey, I remember you were over there last time. Yeah, I left the SQL team. I'm over here doing testing for Visual Studio, or vice versa. Of course, now everyone's just going to Azure, so it's a little different migration. Does anybody ever experience this? This is not a good one. I mean, keep the team together, literally and physically. Keep them from forming a lot and often. If management doesn't get it, drop Tuckman's model on the desk and say, look, here you go. And I mentioned collaboration, working together, but there's also times where you don't want to sit in a war room all the time. If you read an Agile book or a Scrum book, they're going to say, tear down the cubes, get everyone working together, big round table facing each other, or in an environment where you can just spin around and talk to people. And I believe in that. I believe in the testers being there too. I believe in everybody that's committing to delivering that increment. I'd love to see Dieter sitting in this room as well. But there's times when you need to turn your back. There's times when you're like, look, I need to not collaborate today because I got to sit down and I got to write some really grungy, crypto code. So one thing you can do is you can wire in, put the headphones on. This is actually a photo from, I believe this is Codeplex's team. And the war room in the back there with Happy there waving at the camera. That's chaos, but that's good Scrum. You're sitting there collaborating. And this desk here with the back to everybody, I believe that was Sarah Ford's desk. So I've got this little video here I got to show you. It's a good one. Anybody here watch the Social Network? It's a funny show.
That's a doorbell. I didn't know we had a doorbell.
Andrew, get the door!
No, he's wired in. That's gonna cut into his security deposit.
Andrew.
Not now.
Good boy.
I'm Sean Parker.
Oh, he's wired in.
That's what I'm talking about.
So wired in. I would not say that's a dysfunction. I'd say it is if you were wired in all the time and you didn't attend the daily stand-up, you never went home, and you never talked to anybody. But a tap on the shoulder or an instant message, hey, turn around for a second, headphones off, what can we talk about? That's great. How many of you wire in when you code? Awesome. So here's my tactic, number one. Use active listening. When you're in the meetings, when you're in the stand-ups, when you're having the sprint planning meetings, what I think is the most important meeting or time box in Scrum is sprint planning, because that's where it's the last attempt to understand fully the requirements that the product owner wants you to build, the acceptance criteria, exactly what they're looking for. And it's also when the team commits to doing it. Yeah, we're going to do it. We all agree we can deliver this sprint. So in meetings that are that important, you want to use active listening. And it makes a lot of sense. It's just very hard to do. Actively listen, focus on the person talking. Look at them. Make eye contact with them. No devices, no phones, no computers, things like that. Avoid your distractions. Avoid unrelated thoughts. Another thing, too, is if you're the one talking, just follow up with, was that clear? Were there any questions on that? If you want to be a bit of an alpha, you could say, what did I just tell you? My wife does that all the time. Okay, I need you to go get this at the store. Yes, dear. Yes, dear. Yes, dear. Okay, what are you getting at the store? Sometimes you need to do that, especially if the guy's still kind of wired in. This is where you can use your sticky note trick I talked about. Body language is good. Anybody have a problem with active listening like I do? Wants to admit it? Right here, right now? Stand up and admit your problem. How about the Pomodoro technique? You guys ever heard of this one? You've all seen these timers though, right? They sell these everywhere. Little tomato timers that tell you when the sauce is done or when the oatmeal is about to explode. This one's simple, okay? Get the team members to all get a tomato, put it on their desk. At the top of the hour or when they start working, whatever, you go click, click, click to 25 minutes, sit it down. They're working, they're wired in or not, but the timer's sitting there going, and then everyone else knows when you walk up to, Frank's desk and you look, I'll be back in 17 minutes to ask you my question. So you don't interrupt people, there's timers are going. And you let the customers know that, you let the product owner know that, you let the stakeholders know that, the chickens. Hey, if you see a timer on a desk and it's not at 0, go away. Come back when it's at 0. And the flip side of that is when it does hit 0, take a short break for 5 minutes because you might have people coming back then that didn't want to interrupt you earlier. And then every 3 or 4 Pomodoros, timers, take a longer break. It's a good one. It's simple. And it's that constant interruption which will kill you. Speaking of constant interruptions, does anybody use Microsoft Outlook? I mean, out of the box, the default is, let you know I'm running and you've got mail and I'm busy and you're busy. By default, I'm going to play a sound, I'm going to change the mouse pointer, I'm going to show the little envelope in the toolbar, I'm going to have the little Microsoft agent start dancing on your screen, whatever. I mean, there's lots of candy it will do to tell you you've got mail. And then you're like Pavlov's dog. Mail, 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 mail. And you're like, oh, just him. Or TFS is telling you someone checked in something or a work item's closed. So here you go. Ideally, turn off Outlook. Even delete it if you want, except you might need it later. Less ideally is turn off one or more of these options. And I actually got this idea and this list from Adam Kogan. He runs a company in Australia, and he's the guy with the lists, the list to better, or rules to better project management, rules to better source control, rules to better Scrum. So if you just go out there and Bing, rules to better time management, you'll find his site, and he's got lots of good ideas like this on there. So yeah, get rid of Outlook for sure. If you have time. Oh yeah, Rear Admiral Grace Murray Hopper. Have you heard of this officer before? What term did she invent? COBOL and debugging. I've been preaching for a long time in development, in teams, forgiveness over permission, because it allows you to get things done. So I started just doing some research. I'm like, it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Wikipedia, this lady, and I'm like, I know her. COBOL, bugs. She's the one that coined the term bugs and debugging. I guess because back then it was all stacked up, cards that fed into the hopper that were read. And if a card misfed because there was a bug on it, you debugged it, flip the bug off, put it back in there, and feed it again. But this works. The team. One of the rules of an agile team, one of the principles is the team should have whatever they need to get the work done they've committed to doing. It's kind of like, hey, look, you put us in a box. The time box thing works 2 ways. If you're going to tell us we've got 2 weeks to build this increment, then you need to not stop us from building the increment. So I use the example of the movie Breach. Remember that one? The guy, FBI guy, and he gets brought back and put there in the desk, and his helper, the young guy, said, hey, go get us some computers. Well, we'll have to fill out the form, and it'll be 6 weeks. And he's like, no, that's not how you do it. You just walk the hallways until you see a big stack of computers, and you bring me back 2 of them. It's like, yeah, that's one of those things where I'll just get it done today and ask forgiveness later. I'm not advocating stealing computers. Don't get me wrong there. But you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes, why not have less meetings and more initial work? Take some initiative. It may be wrong. You might need to ask forgiveness. But in the long run, nothing's blocking you. A good team that commits together to delivering something will break and bend a few rules like this. I think it's just kind of funny that she's also the lady that had the term debugging, which is the name of this talk. Always be transparent. If you're asked about it at the next meeting. Now, we didn't really decide which ORM model to use. Why is it I'm seeing now that we've chosen N-hibernate or whatever? Well, it met the criteria. It was fit for purpose, and we didn't want to spend a couple days because we knew you were gone deciding what was the best thing to use. This is fit for purpose. Have you guys heard that term before, fit for purpose? I'm going to talk about that in my emergent architecture talk. That's definitely a how thing. Product owners should say, here's what I want, but not get involved in how you build it. So the fact that I've used N-hibernate over, entity framework over XYZ shouldn't really matter as long as it met the acceptance criteria. But always be transparent. Let's move on to process now. Right. Don't make bad decisions. If you are going to choose something that's going to impact the future of the product, do so smartly. you don't need to necessarily have a meeting and wait for consensus, because I've been in those companies' environments where you're not going to get consensus ever. So if you are going to just step out and do it, make sure you can back up your reason for doing it. So why did you choose nhibernate? Well, 3 of the people on our team know nhibernate. We've got oodles of code over here. For the requirements we have in front of us, it'll work just fine. Something like that. Good question. Process. Another way I explain this is you can take great tools, such as Visual Studio, Team Foundation Server, and mess them up with a bad process. You can take great tools and a great process and mess them up with bad people. That's why I start with the people discussion first. People over process over tools. Another way I've heard that said is culture eats process for breakfast. No matter what our great process is here, if the culture is we do what we want when we want to, or we don't do it that way, good luck. So Martin Fowler recently described something called flaccid scrum. I didn't really put the term scrum in here. I'm just saying don't be flaccid. But if you're going to do a process, don't just use the names. Okay, I had a client a couple years ago, and I don't think they're here at the conference, so I'll go ahead and mention what they told me. I said, what methodology do you use? What process or framework do you use to write your software? Oh, we use Scrum. I'm like, okay, well, tell me about it. No, nothing to tell you. We use Scrum. I'm like, humor me. Tell me what you do. They're like, well, okay, so at a sprint planning meeting, we sit there and the product owner tells us what to build. And then we have our second part of the meeting, which is we decide how long the sprint has to be in order to build that much stuff. I'm like, wow, I heard product owner, sprint, backlogs. I heard all the right terms. You're not doing Scrum. So Scrum but, have you heard this term before? I'm doing Scrum but we have variable length sprints. I'm doing Scrum but we don't have a product owner. I'm doing Scrum but we have 4 product owners. There's lots of ways that you can mess up Scrum by not following the rules of Scrum. Flaccid Scrum takes it a step further. You may be using the right rules. 1 product owner, sprints are always the same. But there's no inspecting and adapting. At the sprint review, you're showing the increment, people are nodding their heads, you go back and you do another one. There's no energy there to say, let's look at the backlog, let's put some new things in there, let's adapt what we're building based on what we're seeing. Or even more so during the sprint retrospective, where the team says, okay, what went well, what didn't go well, what do we want to change for next time? And either nothing's identified or nothing gets changed. So the whole inspect and adapt thing is not just there to be self-serving. Scrum or any agile exercise you use, any of the methods, you need to adapt it. You need to identify problems, change them. And if you don't, you're being flaccid. One such area where you can be flaccid is in the definition of done. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But you come to conferences like this, and every third person from Microsoft or speaking on stage mentions the word Scrum. You might also start to think that Scrum becomes a silver bullet. Hey, if we do Scrum, it just magically works. No. P90X, anybody seen those commercials on TV? That's the silver bullet. You buy it and you look like that guy. Okay? The analogy is very similar. Wow, I've heard awesome things. I buy that P90X and I watch those DVDs and then I just sit there with my oatmeal and I just get ripped as I watch the movie. No, you have to always be working. So doing something like Scrum or something like XP, it's easy to explain. Here's a sprint and here's a time box and here's the product owner and that does this and does this and does this. Now do it every day forever. Here's a push-up. Go down, go up. Sounds easy. Do 50 of them every day. So get a coach. Having a coach is a good idea too. There's no magic here. You can't just say we're doing Scrum and all of a sudden things get better. The definition of done, DOD. This is somewhere else that teams can become flaccid. In addition to building that user story that says we want a Twitter feed on the homepage with those 5 acceptance criteria things, there are other organizational and product criteria that you've got to consider. Our corporate standard is C#, SQL Server. We like our homepage to have the Metro UI look, whatever. So our definition of done will include those kinds of overarching things, cross-cutting things. I hear that term a lot too. And it can even get down as deep as all new code must be written with unit tests. All unit tests must pass. All existing tests must pass. All code has to be written in pair programming. Everything's got to be checked in and labeled. You know, we always work off of a branch. Things like that can also be in the definition of done. So there can be, you know, ALM things in there and process things in there as well. And you know what? The team has to own this. If you have a definition of done, it's not just there to look pretty. You need to audit it. Everything you do needs to be done according to this definition before you can say you're done with it. Now, where do you keep a definition of done? Document on SharePoint, or if you're using the new SharePoint, there's a wiki on there. You can put a wiki page up. You can put a big sticky note on, you know, those big giant sticky notes that you have in the break room sometimes. You can put that on the wall of the dev room. And this, I don't know if I can bring this link up here. One of our fellow MVPs actually created a definition of done work item control. So if you are using TFS, you can go in there and, I know it's in German, but if you scroll down, the English is down here below. But if you set up the field control, you can actually put in your definition of done items here. They just become checkboxes that sit on the user story or product backlog item, work item. So there's a simple one. Coded, acceptance criteria met, test passed, checked in. Start simple. Don't go for 100% code coverage right off the bat. Go for something achievable given the brownfield mess that you've inherited, and then ratchet it. How many of you have a definition of done? That's impressive. That's more than I was guessing. How many of you didn't even know about it until now? Or you knew about it, but you didn't have it formalized, like, oh, that's what that's called. I just thought that's, you know, do that so that, you know, Frank doesn't yell at me. Another quiz. All right, so given that we don't want to be flaccid, given that we've got a strong definition of done, given that we want to make our product owner happy, you know, we've got a lot of things here we're wrestling with. So our team believes they've met their commitments. Product owners, you know, seen the increment. Product owner's been coming by the desk the last few days, says, I love this. You know, your little Twitter thing you built here is awesome. I want it. Ship it. So at the sprint review, I want it now. Let's put it on our site today. That's the whole point, potentially shippable. Except that while you're up there demoing it, or maybe just before you're demoing it to the product owner, you notice that there's this CA2210 code analysis warning that popped up, or FX cop if you're familiar with that. Oh, you guys, the teams look at each other like, oh crap, we forgot to strong sign this DLL. What do? I mean, the product owner wants it, says give it to me. I don't know what that is. What's a CA 210? It looks like it works. It's showing me the last 10 tweets. I don't see any you know, edgy language in there. Ship it. So part of what a mature team should do is weigh this and say, well, gosh, should we ship this? It's undone work. It's one little checkbox we missed, you know, that no code analysis warnings. How many of you would just ship it? Product owner signs the check. He's paying a bill. He's paying our paycheck. Ship it. How many of you feel uneasy about doing that and might hold off? I mean, because if you just ignore that, maybe this thing won't deploy to the GAC, or security won't work, or it can't be obfuscated, or something downstream. Who knows, maybe you break the training materials or the marketing documentation, who knows what. This is part of being flaccid, not being flaccid. A flaccid team would be like, whatever, ship it, it works, we'll deal with that later. But eventually those laters catch up with you, and it catches up with you exponentially. So that whole technical debt, that kind of snowballing effect, it's exactly these kinds of things here that catch that. So per good Scrum, per good mature team, the team should say, Mr. Product Owner, we don't have anything to demo. We did not complete our, you know, commitment this sprint. We were very close. I know you think it's ready to go, but for some technical reasons, we don't feel comfortable showing it and certainly not shipping it. And if you stand your ground, you're going to be like, all right, review's over. It's retrospective time. So the Scrum team goes to the retrospective, including the product owner, and he'll do that thing with the glasses where he pulls them off and throws them across the table. You know that move, right? Pissed off. All right, what in the hell just happened? I had all the board of directors here looking at this. They all know about Twitters and Facebooks and all this stuff. And they want this social networking thing going on. And you're not going to give it to them because of this. So, yeah, I mean, crucial conversations. Crucial conversations. But if I were to mute the microphone now, I might just say, I might ship it myself if it's something this minor. So be transparent. Ultimately, at the end of the day, let them know why it's a bad thing. Let them know why, you're not done with it. And be transparent. Well, gosh, we thought we could get that last thing done that we committed to doing, but we can't because our definition of done says we're not done with it yet. I think everybody should see the team's definition of done, even stakeholders, users. It may not make sense to them. They're like, what's code coverage? But knowing other people are looking at it and maybe even seeing the auditable process of it, progress of it, might not be a bad thing. In my world, everybody gets to see and put things into the product backlog. Okay, this might be a little bit of noise in some environments. That's why there are different states on the work items in TFS, so you're only considering those that have been approved or those that have been prioritized. But what good's a company and a product that everybody's using if the common person, anonymously even, suggest improvements to it? So I usually ask companies, do you have a way for, somebody out in, Boise, Idaho, who's using your website to suggest a feature improvement for the website? wish@somecompany.com. That email comes in and gets routed into a work item, perhaps, into a backlog. Like, no, we've got our committee that meets every September, and they consider all things that need to be done. And I feel the same way about, about the sprint backlog too, and the progress the team is doing against their commitments for the sprint. So, burn downs and velocity, that should all be apparent as well. I was doing so good on my voice there. And bugs. I remember way back when, I used to love Borland. I was a Borland developer back in the Turbo Pascal days. But unless you were a gold partner and paid them money, they wouldn't tell you what the bugs were in the product. This is a long time ago. I remember Microsoft from very early on listed their bugs. They had those KB articles. See this, here's what's happened, no workaround, or here's the workaround. So companies that are transparent in the bugs in their products, that's a good thing. It's a hard thing, and sometimes you don't want everybody to know you've got problems with your encryption layer, or credit cards aren't being stored correctly, but that's all about being transparent. Hold retrospectives. With Scrum it's very easy. After the sprint review, you have a sprint retrospective, and you celebrate your victories too. It's not just about improving and always, the sad path. Have some happy path too. Meet off site. Have a social time, You shipped it. Enjoy that. If you do identify any tasks to do, make sure you do them. Okay, and again, it's the Scrum Master's job to help make sure those tasks get logged and assigned to people. Also, it's the whole team that participates. It's not just the core developers and testers. It's the Scrum Master. It's the product owner. So it can get emotional, and you might not want to be transparent when the guy that throws the glasses is there, but you need to learn to do that. Get a coach. How many of you remember this guy? Was 2008, wasn't it? 2008. This is a Scottish guy, actor, I think. He was actually at one of the PDCs or Tech Eds or something. All right, so he wasn't Scottish. But he was the team system coach. And I'm a big fan of coaches, someone that can sit there, embed with the team, and not just train you, but also day-to-day suggest improvements to these practices. How many of you have a coach or have worked with a coach? Agile coach, or how many of you are coaches? Yeah, hi, how you doing back there? Coaches are good, but eventually you want to get rid of them, not rely on them too much. But it's just like the metaphors I did earlier with working out. You know, get down, get your butt down. What are you doing? Get those arms out a little wider. Come up again. You got one more in you. Let's go. Oh yeah, now for the easy part. Tool dysfunctions. Use Visual Studio. Done. I got to put a good word here for Visual Studio Scrum. As you've noticed, I've mentioned Scrum about 1,000 times. I should have turned this into a drinking game. But Microsoft announced the Scrum template last year at TechEd. I think it's been downloaded about 50,000 times now. So it's quite popular. It is a lot simpler, more minimalistic than the MSF Agile template in TFS. But it maps directly to Scrum principles. So you won't see something called a user story. You'll see a product backlog item. You'll be actually a sprint work item where you can set up your start dates, your end dates, your sprint goal. And instead of issue, there's impediments, things like that. And it's a free download from Microsoft. There's guidance online. And if you're up for it, you can even go on and take the Professional Scrum Developer Program. Just wanted to put this slide up for a second. It's just at scrum.org. Ken Schwaber, he left the Scrum Alliance a couple years ago, started scrum.org. That's where Microsoft gravitated towards, and together they put together a solution to combat the flaccid Scrum blog post from Martin Fowler. So those of you who think Martin Fowler's blog posts don't have effects, I mean, that one post on flaccid Scrum got Microsoft, Ken Schwaber, my company, and about 50 trainers in the world going to start addressing this problem. Because, and if you're a Scrum Master, there is training and certification and books and T-shirts for you. Product owner, same thing. There's training and certification. Developer, it's like, well, as far as Scrum's concerned, 15 minutes a day is spent during the stand-up, and then you go off and do something. So this program, this course, is about what happens the other 7 hours and 45 minutes of the day. You know, how do you work together as a team? Some of these dysfunctions I've been talking about, how do you combat those? How do you use the ALM tools in Visual Studio to work efficiently? You know, how do you set up your areas, your iterations, your sprint backlog? So we get right into the meat of this problem in here. We actually put the teams together to start solving problems in sprints on their own. And there's a couple Scrum developer trainers in the room, I see. We can get them to comment offline later afterwards. Follow us on Twitter, contact me, or go to scrum.org if you have any questions on that. And related content, I'm doing a couple more talks on Thursday. And I noticed that there's an Agile buffet talk. I think Joel's doing that one tomorrow morning. And that looked pretty good. That looked like it's going to be Agile, Scrum, XP, Lean, Kanban, get your questions answered there kind of a thing. So I think we've got some time for questions now. If you want to bail out, just make sure you complete your evaluation. Post any comments there you would. I get the voice, understand that. Thank you for bearing with me, and have a great Tech Ed.